Welcome back, my Be Health Empowered family. Thanks so much for joining me again on Excuse Me, Doctor. Of course, my name is Dr. Melissa Clark. Please call me Dr. Mel. We are here each and every week bringing you the information that you need to make the wise health decisions for yourself, your family, and even your community. So thank you for tuning in on whatever platform that you are watching us. But if you are a newbie and you're on Facebook, please remember to hit that like button. And if you're joining us for the first time on YouTube, please remember to hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate you for it. And now that we have all of that out of the way, I would really love to start to create an amazing week with you, um, based upon the topics we're going to cover tonight on Excuse Me, Doctor. So this is our once a month special opportunity where we co-host the show with the Howard University Research Centers in Minority Institutions. But before we get to that, I want to welcome my incredible co-host, Mr. Wayne Bruce, bringing us the word from the street. Wayne, how you doing?
You might as well invite both of us at the same time. I'm just gonna blow the surprise.
I like to build up. I like to build it up when Karen is here.
You can't build it up. Yeah. My hair looks crazy, Dr. Mel. My hair looks crazy. I had a baseball cap on all day, and I apologize. I apologize to our listeners and our viewers. The people who can't see me, I'm not apologizing to you because y'all don't even know what I look like, and I'm cool.
And basically, nobody would have even noticed if you didn't say anything. I'm just saying.
But I'm self-conscious. I'm in the studio. I'm not in the streets.
Right.
I've left the streets, Dr. Mel.
Okay.
I'm just
we are glad that you're bringing us the word from the streets in the studio. And now let us bring Karen into the conversation.
Okay.
Because she is from the Community Engagement Core of the Howard University Research Centers in Minority Institutions. And she is one of our co-hosts tonight.
Hello, once again, everybody. Lovely to see you, Dr. Mel. And Wayne, I think you look handsome. I like that.
Well. And there you
Karen knows how to win friends and influence people.
And there you have it.
I can tell jokes, but I can't tell why.
Dr. Mel. I might get a raise. Karen, talk it up.
All right.
Karen is only here once a month. I'm just saying. But you should know that she is the project coordinator for the Community Engagement Research Center in Minorities Institutions. I can't say that fast 3 times, so I'm just going to call it RCMI program at the Howard University College of Medicine.
I think that's the best approach because that's what we use, RCMI. And just briefly, what we do, because it's a very long title, I'm actually in the Community Engagement Core. And basically what we do is a lot of listening. And then once we've heard what we need to hear, we make it a point to make sure that the research that we do at Howard University is in line with what our communities are interested in and what they really need. So that's really what I do.
And that's really how research should be done. It should be done with the participant and the community in mind to make sure that it benefits the community, right?
Definitely. And if it's not, it's just more work, and
it's all about the community. So, it's all about the community.
It is all about the community.
I am a man
That's
of the
what
community.
We're here
for. Exactly. So what are we talking about tonight, y'all?
We are talking about one of my favorite topics, probably yours too, Wayne. It's food.
It's as food. If y'all couldn't tell.
Me 3.
We love food. I think we as a people, we have a special relationship with it, and we're going to talk about what it means to us as a culture, and we'll spend some time on a new topic, at least new to me, that I've never heard of. I'm really excited about, and how really we should be eating mindfully, especially since we're going into the colder seasons, and there's just so much desire to just put your face in a stew or a cake. So we have two fabulous guests that we're going to talk to about
Yeah.
those things.
So make sure you stop right now, stop what you're doing, share this episode because it's going to be about probably the majority of people's favorite topic. But we're going to really go into, food, not just as a personal need, but the way that it binds us as a community. And in addition to those nutrition considerations, we're going to talk about how the price of food limits availability and our choices and how we can navigate that and how those trends affect communities of color. So, this is going to be a really great episode. Make sure that you stop and share it right now. And so we're going to see you back in a little bit, right, Wayne?
I'm out. I'm deuces.
All right. All right.
Hi, Wayne.
So, we, of course, are going to talk about, as I mentioned, this episode on food. And so now that we have set the table, so to speak, about what we're talking about, let's welcome our guests. First of all, we have Dr. Linda Thompson. She's a nutrition consultant and retired professor of nutrition from Howard University. She has extensive experience in developing nutrition related chronic disease prevention and management interventions for African Americans. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Thompson.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Welcome, Dr. Thompson.
Hey.
And then we also have Dr. Psyche Williams Forson. She's a professor and department chair in the Department of American Studies at the University of Maryland, College Park. She's also an author of several books on Black food studies, including the bestseller Eating While Black: Food Shaming and Race in America. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Psyche.
Hey, thank you for having me this evening.
All right. Well, now let's just jump into this because this is going to be a rich discussion. Karen, why don't you start us off?
Absolutely. Good evening, ladies. So, as I think we mentioned just now, food is probably everyone's favorite subject. But my question is, because we view food in so many different ways, some look at it as just fuel for our bodies, some people look at it as emotional comfort. How do you, either of you, view food? We'll start there. Dr. Psyche?
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dr. Thompson, please.
Well, personally, I view food because I'm a nutritionist and I know the value of food and the importance of eating correctly and eating healthy. Food is a way for me to preserve my body, to move through the world in a healthier way, in a healthier manner. Food for me is an example because if I'm going to talk the talk around nutrition, I have to walk the walk. So not only am I eating for myself, but I'm eating as an example for others. And I find ways to prepare healthy foods in a way that's tasty. And I'm always inviting friends to come and try what I'm eating, and of course sharing with the public and studies that I have done over the years and intervention, particularly in low-income communities, exposing people to how you could eat healthier. So I like food is a way aside from just nourishing the body. It's a way for people to connect together, and also food is medicine, which is a whole nother topic.
Right.
Definitely. Thank you for that. And Dr. Psyche, if I may call you that.
Sure. I agree with everything Dr. Thompson has said. And because I'm trained as a material culturalist, that is, I study the material world and objects in the world, I see food as a set of objects. And it's important because we connect to things every day, right? Our phones, our homes, the things that we use to decorate our environments. And so I see food as a communicator of who we are, of our multiple identities. I see food as a signal to other people that we belong to a group or in multiple groups. I see food as a conveyor For example, stereotypes that evolve around food. And so food for me is also very much power, because objects have the power to send messages. And so that, in addition to all of the areas of nutrition, I come at food from a social, cultural, historical point of view, because it's also tends to be invisible in those ways. And so I try to remind people of the ways in which food functions in that way. So it informs the nutritional aspects, and it also informs the way in which we govern and live our lives.
So that's really fascinating, because clearly this is shaping up to not be just a conventional food discussion. And so I would love if you could expound on that, Dr. Psyche, and talk about food. We talked about communities of color, specifically Black Americans. What are the forces that have shaped how African Americans develop their food culture? So some of all the different ways that you define food, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure, I'll do this in 2 minutes or less. So I entered the conversation of food studies because um, of a novel that I was reading when I first entered graduate school, and I realized that this 19th century Black women author spent a great deal of time telling us about the food and the furnishings in this 19th century Black home. And in all the historical work I had done up until that point, I had never seen anyone deal with the food. Well, as it turns out, many years and decades later, when I was working on the dissertation, because at that point I was working on my master's thesis, I realized that food conveys. For example, when Tiger Woods won the Masters tournament for the first time in the late 90s, he was told not to, because you get to choose what foods you want. And he was told not to choose chicken, collard greens, or whatever the hell those people eat. And so that, coupled with some other things, made me think about, well, are Black people still connected to fried chicken, stereotypically at the turn of the 21st century? And like I said, there were several other things going on, which led me down a pathway of studying Black people and chicken, not fried chicken, but Black people and their connection to chicken. As it turns out, I found a cache of images, sheet music, stereo cards, greeting cards, all of these images from the 1800s that showed Black people in very compromising positions with chicken, stealing them. And it was mostly men, Black men and boys, stealing chickens and so forth and so on. And so that ended up partly being my study for my dissertation, or my doctoral thesis. It wasn't the story that I wanted to tell about Black people being reduced to chicken and watermelon. Instead, I wanted to talk about the ingenious things we had done with food, and I ended up doing that in my doctoral thesis, which became my first book, Building Houses Out of Chicken Legs: Black Women, Food, and Power. And so it's a very comprehensive history of Black people's relationship to chicken, or the gospel bird, or fried chicken. And it shows you all the myriad ways that we have used food to build homes, to put ourselves through institutional, educational institutions, to be comedians, to create music. So there were all of these many ways that we had engaged with food that exceeded and went beyond eating and nutrition. And so that's one example of the reason why I do this historical and social context around food, because I want folks to know that it's both and.
So we have food as culture, and then we have food, as you mentioned, food as medicine, and food as what helps and keeps us healthy. What are some of the ways, Dr. Thompson, in which there might be a conflict between what we have been acculturated to eat, based upon our culture and the forces that have shaped that, and potentially doing us harm?
Well, I think because during slavery, we were eating quote unquote low on the hog, where we were getting scraps and had to make do with parts of the animal that people normally wouldn't eat. And over time, it has been infused into our culture. So we're eating foods that may not be the best for us, but it's comfort, it's what we know, it's part of our culture. So we continue with that, even though it may not be supporting health these days in 2023. I mean, we have moved from a culture where we were hard workers, we were working with our hands, we expended a lot of energy, to a people that sit on the couch a lot, or have jobs that are we sit all day and we're not doing a lot of manual labor, yet we're eating in the way that we used to eat when we were doing manual labor. So and also the tradition of preparing foods, of cooking, has not really been passed down in the last few generations, especially since fast food has come on the scene. So we're not preparing food. We're not really in control of what's in the food, which is a whole nother conversation. And we're eating those things that are not really contributing to health, but we have, for some reason, developed a tongue that is really moving and loves grease, loves salt, and loves sugar. And so we're not really getting into the spicing that we used to. We only use the same seasonal, accent, Old Bay, salt and pepper is pretty much it, is the staple seasoning. And so we don't use fresh herbs anymore. We eat at carryouts, we eat at fast food places, and we don't know how to cook. And I'm not blasting anybody. It's just, this is how we have evolved as a culture. And unfortunately, it has had a profound impact on our health.
And what are some of the forces that caused us to evolve that way? So, for example, we mentioned at the beginning, food prices went up during COVID. What are some of the other forces that you think have led to that?
Well, I think.
Can I?
Go ahead, Dr. Psyche.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in for just a moment. I agree with everything Dr. Thompson has said, especially in the last 6 decades, in the last 60 years. However, I just want to go back and amend, just if I may, respectfully. African people in this country were enslaved for 2 centuries, right? And so we have to, 2 to 3 centuries. So we have to remember that enslavement changed over time. And so while in the 1800s, we absolutely were given what folks call the scraps, we also want to remember that, and this is a very important point, I think, the country did not look then like it does today. So we were surrounded by foliage. We were surrounded by grasses. We were surrounded by weeds. We were surrounded by terrapins and fish. And my point simply is, part of the narrative we have been fed is that Black people derive from scraps. And that is not true, because it leads us to believe that we are part of a deficit model of survival, right? But we aren't. We are ingenious people. If it weren't for indigenous people and Africans, Europeans would not have survived in this country. We were brought here because of our agricultural knowledge. I have done the research that suggests there's no way we could have survived in the New World, and many of us didn't, but many more of us would not have, if we didn't have the agricultural knowledge that we were brought here to be enslaved with. Consequently, you have to remember, we then use that knowledge to fish, to hunt, to trap, to get pokeweed, to get poke salad, to get, all of this kind of stuff. So I'm not saying we ate high on the hog. Some of us, depending upon the type of plantation you were on, you could keep a garden. You may share with your neighbors. So I just want us to be mindful that up until about 60 years ago, we had very diverse diets. As Dr. Thompson said, we ate from the land because we worked the land. We were sharecropping. We owned farms. But in the last 60 years, Black folks have seen their farmland taken from them. They've moved toward more industrial environments, as you've mentioned, so forth and so on. But I just wanted to jump in simply to debunk that misnomer that we derive from scraps, because we don't. We were ingenious people, and we contributed to the culinary diversity of this nation and to many nations abroad as part of the African diaspora. So I just want to respectfully disagree and push back on that point about scraps, because it is a pervasive narrative and part of that external knowledge that you're talking about, Dr. Mel, that we constantly get told. So we think, well, we come from scraps, we ate scraps, so we're going to return to scraps. But it's actually not true. A lot of us ate off the land.
Right. And I think it's a both and. I
Yes,
think
absolutely.
both are true. And I think it kind of
Sure.
goes to the question that I was going in the direction of what has pushed us into some of the more detrimental diets that we have today that we still consider part of Black culture, right? But
Yes.
aren't really, because you answered it, we are not as close to the land. Our land got taken away from us. We moved into industrial settings. We moved into cities. And so the opportunity to fish and hunt and trap weren't there. The foliage and the herbs and the herb gardens that we might have been tending in more rural environments aren't there. So I think you kind of, brought that out. And so I guess it also leads me to the question that I was going to ask you, which is what is food shaming and what are its impacts?
Well, I just want to go back to what Dr. Thompson said by way of answering this question very quickly. Part of that shaming occurs because we stop passing down that knowledge that, Dr. Thompson referred to, of how to cook in ways that incorporates herbs and a variety of vegetables and things of that nature. A lot of those vegetables became inaccessible to us, right? And they became, for kale, perfect example. We've been eating kale all our lives. All of a sudden, kale becomes popular in non-Black communities, and now it's almost unaffordable at times, right? Or they're also forgetting that we use garlic and we use lemongrass and we use lemons and limes and allspice and different kinds of. We haven't passed some I don't want to say all, because many non-American cultures, the Caribbean culture, African diasporic cultures, they do still use a lot of those herbs and spices, right? We, on the other hand, in America, often do not. I mean, pepper pot soup, right? Or pepper pot soup. And eating habanero peppers and other kinds of peppers that will help, right, with our blood and the cleansing of our bodies. Oftentimes we have gotten away from a lot of that information and have gone, and it's not just us. When I was in one of the Caribbean countries, we were told, hey, we don't cook our traditional foods anymore because everyone is working and we have so many fast food options.
Right.
I think that was actually one of the things I was waiting respectfully to see where I could jump in and sort of speak for those of us who just simply don't have the time to devote as much as we may have had in the past. It's a completely different topic, but grind culture is really real and we have to fight it every day. And part of that bleeds, I think, into the time that we spend on self-care and, by direct relation, preparation of food. And I think that that's across the board. And particularly if we're talking about functioning in this society in which we've chosen to live, that's a very real factor.
Right.
Well, I think that if we are able to make food a priority and understand the importance of eating healthy foods, we can find a way to integrate cooking. For example, you could say take a half a day, maybe a Sunday afternoon, and cook several meals, put them in small individual containers, throw them in the freezer. So all you have to do is snatch something out instead of getting something from a fast food place or something of that nature. You have control over what you've prepared. You can spice it up and make it taste the way you want it and make it healthier. So all I'm saying is that If there's a will, there's a way.
So how do you make that connection, Dr. Thompson, between helping people understand that food can help to keep them healthy? How do you help to address all the competing forces that we have for our time and get people to focus on food prep and how to think about their nutrition in a proactive way?
It's difficult to reach everyone because, again, there's
Well,
so
let's
many.
just say the people that you work with.
Okay. The people that I work with are usually through a grant-funded program where we come in and provide a series of nutrition education support sessions, including food demonstrations and tasting, and educating people and having them talk about their experiences with food, what works, what doesn't. So, but that's so, the problem is that's so intensive. It's not a good bang for your buck, because once a person goes through the program, oh, they're doing great there, and then they leave, they go back home. There's no support for the information that they learn, and over time, it sort of fades away, and they're back. So it's difficult. I really can't answer that because I don't know, but I know that we have to make some changes. Dr. MEL, just from the patients that you treat and how pervasive chronic disease has been in our community. And it's getting worse and it's not getting better. And I always say there may not be a lot of things that we can control in our life, but we certainly can control what we put in our mouth. And if we get some education, knowledge is powered, but it's a challenge, and because food that we eat is so comforting. A person that is more open to trying a variety of foods has more of a chance of eating and being open to eating healthier than those who have their food safety zone, eat 10 or 12 foods all the time and don't want to try something else because, that may be nasty and I don't want to do that, and I'm stressed. I want to eat what I eat that makes me feel good. So again,
Or I didn't grow up eating that.
right.
Which
But also, if I can just jump in and say, you're absolutely right. But also, the closer you are to choice, you tend to have more flexibility with your income. And so part of what I try to do is bring the balance in the medical and the cultural. You're right. I mean, I've worked with a number of different groups and participated in a number of different food banks, et cetera. And where you take these classes. I take these classes on a regular basis, and I think we have to be mindful that people go to what's comfortable because it's familiar and they already know the cost. So this goes back to the eggs, conversation you all started with, right? With the price of eggs increasing, but not just eggs, all food. I'm going to rely upon what I know. And then I think we have to balance the food conversations with the very real reality of being Black in America. And this goes back to what you were asking Dr. MEL about food shaming. Sometimes we say, well, you don't want to eat healthy, but it's not that. It's like you've got people who are working 2 jobs. Sometimes hustle culture is involved because you've got to make a living. Because as we know, the cost of rent and buying homes in America for people for whom wealth has not been an open door, we're just barely trying to hold on, right? And so this is one of the reasons why folks don't like it, but I'm a purporter of buying food from the dollar store, because when you can go to a dollar store and I have $20, I can buy nowadays not 20 things, but maybe 15 things, then tell me what I can buy: frozen broccoli, maybe some pasta, maybe some rice, different spices that I can use. And then I can manage my time and my money, especially for aging people or people who have medication needs, who often go food insecure mid-month because they have to decide, do I buy medicine or do I buy food. And it's not always medicine for diabetes, et cetera, even though we're seeing those particular dynamics shoot up. People have mental health medication that adds weight on them. People have other kinds of medications that they have to take. So my point simply is that we need a number of different interventions, including those that would allow you to go to places where food might be affordable, even though they're not popular, because grocery stores and farmers markets are not panaceas. They are simply another way in which people can access food. And so I encourage us to think about living Black in America and the number of stressors we have above and beyond food, and the ways in which those things impact how we survive in America, trying to eat, trying to live, trying to pay everyday bills, trying to take care of our kids, et cetera.
Absolutely. And I think those are excellent points. We talk a lot about social factors that impact health, and you ran down a number of them in depth. And from a nutritionist standpoint, I'm sure those questions come up, Dr. Thompson, that Dr. Psyche just brought up when you're working with individual clients in the many projects that you've worked on, especially when it comes to economical ways to eat nutritiously. And if you do shop at the dollar store, where there are lots of canned goods and lots of food options that are either high in sugar or high in salt, how to avoid those to get to the ones that are helpful. So could you comment on that?
Yeah, and I agree with Dr. Psyche, but on the other side of that, there are ways that people can choose food. There are foods that you can choose at the supermarket: beans, rice. You can feed a family of four for $8, a complete meal with protein, with carbs, with veggies. But you have to know how to do it. You have to know how to shop. You have to want to do it, which is the major thing. And for example, you can get a crock pot at a thrift store and put beans, rice in there, or put everything in there, go to work, turn it down, come back, it's cooked, it's done, and you have a meal. So I mean, it's just looking at other ways that you might not have traditionally been managing how your menus and your meals, but there's certainly a way to do it. And I get the dollar store. Here's a thought that I've had for several years that I just want to throw out, that I feel that community-based food co-ops would be a wonderful way to go, because I don't know how familiar you guys might be with food co-ops.
Explain a little bit about those.
A food cooperative is a place where you can buy foods in bulk. Like if you can buy 10-cent worth of spices instead of having to pay $5 for a small can. You can buy beans and rice and flours and all kinds of nuts and seeds in bulk. And it's run by the community. It's a community board. You can join the community and get the co-op and get a discount on your food. You can be employed by the food co-op, so it provides jobs, it provides lower cost food items, and the community decides what kinds of foods that they want in the food co-op. So I've always felt that was a real important way to go, especially with our community. We are so talented. We have entrepreneurs there that would be easily, I mean, there are people that run food closets out of community public housing communities. Sure. And they go in their apartment. Yeah, you can come and get this and this. That entrepreneurship can be expanded into developing food co-ops. So it's just things that we don't normally think about, but that can certainly help to serve our community and provide healthier food options.
Sure.
So Dr. Thompson, on that note, I'd like to jump in. I can't believe I'm actually going to say this because I personally don't eat meat, but meat hasn't been mentioned. And I have kind of a two-pronged question about that. One, with the co-ops that you mentioned, are they able to be found just about anywhere in this country? Is there like a network or something where people can find out what's close and available to them. And two, it would seem that in that sort of setup that meat may or may not be available. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's up to the food co-op. Normally some meat is available, you
Mhm.
know. Yeah. So
Mhm.
and frozen, not fresh. From in my experience, what I've seen is frozen. And you could Google food co-ops in Kansas City or food co-ops in Washington D.C. or Maryland or wherever you live, and you will find some. There are several here in the D.C. area that I've been going to for years, and it really saves a lot of money. And when I do community-based interventions, we sometimes are able to integrate a trip to the food co-op so people can see what's going on and understand and say, oh, wow, okay, I didn't know I could get this like this. And your food dollars go a long way. They accept food stamps or EBT cards. So, you know, it's a great option. It's a great option.
That's great to know. And I wanted to pivot back to a little bit about what we were talking about before, when we were talking about the cultural influences. Are there, the stereotypes we talked about, frying foods, or cooking our greens with fat back, those kind of stereotypical things. Are there pieces of our cultural history as African Americans that are healthful, that we should be holding on to and holding up as exemplars for healthy eating?
I mean, I think that there are, especially those spaces where we recognize the numerous types of vegetables we have grown up on. From tomato, corn, beans, not being a vegetable, but tomato, corn, beans, greens. Also, I want to share to Dr. Thompson's point. You also have a number of Black farms in this area, some of which offer community sponsored agricultural kind of co-op programs where you can buy in, and several families can go in, and then you get fresh vegetables and fruits throughout the year. And also recognizing that that too is a part of our culture. You may not be a grower, but there may be someone else who you can support. And so every year we talk about Kwanzaa and cooperative economics. Well, this is cooperative economics. I just found out that there's a Black farmers market in Cheverly, Maryland. Had no idea all this time that right here off the Beltway, or off the BW Parkway, there's a Black farmers market. It runs in at overlaps with the non-Black farmers market, but there's that option. Right. And so you can get bread, and you can get some seafood products. And then there are other folks out there, sea moss, all the things that you might want to find. So I think, to Dr. Thompson's point, it's important to do a little bit of work. Google is our friend. We walk around every day with these mini computers in our hand with phones. And so find out, where can I get X, Y, and Z in our area? The other thing that contributes to this kind of different eating is the plethora now of international markets.
Yeah.
A decade ago, we only had H Mart, for example, and you had a spattering of African, Caribbean, and Latin American markets. Now you can find them in pretty much every neighborhood, and you can get everything from mango to avocado to a number of different types of bulk foods, as you mentioned. You can get fresh fish. And these places are cropping up in working class and middle American communities. You may not find them necessarily out in the upper Midwest, which is where I found the most dirt, or out in, let's say, in the hinterlands of Indiana, where they're like, where can you get goat meat? But there are lots of places, certainly in your metro areas, where you can access these different kinds of markets. And, a lot of people, I can't deal with the smell. Find yourself doing something new. You can go in and get your fish, you can get your chicken, you can get your other meat products, you can get smoked turkey as a viable option to the ham hocks. And if you still wedded to the ham hocks, supposedly you can get that as well. But there are a lot more options available to us. And I think we have to be careful about these narratives of only seeing one or two places as food sources. In rural areas, for sure. But in a lot of our urban areas, there are a lot more options. And it's just a matter of us tapping into those tastes that our grandparents and in this day and age, our great grandparents grew up on and grew us up on, or grew our parents up on.
And also
go ahead, Dr. Thompson.
Also, those international stores, the prices are a lot cheaper too.
Yes, they
Right.
are.
They are.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely
exactly.
They are. Yeah,
So,
much more
you know,
affordable.
this is such a rich conversation, and we didn't even get a chance to talk about what are the chronic diseases that a poorly nutritious diet are linked to. But we have to bring in our audience questions because I want to make sure that we have enough time to hear the concerns, the questions that are coming out of the chat. So Wayne, come on back in, join us, and let us know what's going out there on the internet. And you know, we would love to hear you. So
from the interwebs, that's the shadow from what is it? Saturn in Mercury in retrograde. That's the shadow from the Mercury in retrograde thing y'all always talk about. So look, the interwebs are going wild. And for those who don't know, if you're watching this somewhere other than YouTube or anywhere, we pick our questions from and our comments from our Facebook live chat and our YouTube channel. So go in there, like Dr. Mel. And we have a couple of things. We have a question from Michelle Walker Scales, and it reads, I bought a book a few years ago on blue zones. What are blue zones and how have they negatively affected us?
Negatively affected us?
Or helped us?
Or helped us. Okay.
Well, blue zones are where people live to be 100 years old over. And there are certain environmental factors, social factors. It's certainly a key. They're big on community. They support each other always. There's physical activity like walking. The foods are healthier. And the social interactions are certainly helpful to emotional support. And Dr. Psyche, can you add to that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the blue zones. And unfortunately, not enough of us populate those areas. You know, you're talking Vermont and the New England areas, and also, and then out in some of the areas of the Midwest. You know, unfortunately, some of those blue zones are also not necessarily hospitable to people of color, quite frankly, because they are very exclusive communities, and because of the many cultural stereotypes that pervade popular culture, popular media. They see Black people and Black and brown people as intrusive. And so while we may go and we may want to partake of the good air and the wonderful environment, we then have to be concerned about our own safety in some of those communities. And so it's a double-edged sword because we want good life too. As Black and brown people, we want to breathe great air. We want to live free. We want to be able to run down the street and exercise without the fear that we might be mistaken as a threat. But unfortunately, and especially in the last 5 years, with the administrations that we have had, Black folks have been a red bullseye in many of those blue zones.
And the ones in the United States, because they're
international. In the United States, because there are internet. You've got Black Portugal, you've got Black Enclave, but then there are also, and I think here's where the internet is beneficial to tell you where those wonderful places are where you will feel safe living and traveling as a person of color.
Exactly. Yeah. All the great vlogs.
All the vlogs, right, which tell you about that. Yeah.
All great vlogs. We have a question coming from DJ Lance Reynolds. He writes, what are the things to look for on the labels? What is considered high sodium? What are the negative ingredients we should be looking out for?
Dr. Thompson, you want to take that?
Yeah, I want to specifically talk about sodium because studies now, the new data is out that African Americans should be not eating, consuming more than 1,500 milligrams per day of sodium. Yet, on the labels have not caught up with that. And so they're still recommending 2,500 milligrams. So when we look at labels, we should look at the sodium content, the saturated fat content, and the sugar content. Just to, and the percent daily value gives you an idea of how much of that you should be eating that's in that particular item. So without getting too complicated, another thing to look at is serving size, because you may look at an, say it's like 10% sodium content, but it's in a serving. But a serving size could be, if you have, particularly with soups, if you have, it could be 1/8 of the can of soup, or 1/4 of a can of soup. So you really have to look at the serving size and also sugar. There are 4 grams of 4 grams of sugar per teaspoon. So if you're looking at something that says 32 grams of sugar in a serving size, do the math.
Such as in sugary sodas and sugary beverages, fruit juices. And I also just wanted to tack on to the sodium piece. In a lot of in many of our neighborhoods, one of the most ubiquitous restaurant types are Chinese food. You can actually ask, if you love Chinese food, you can ask them to make a low sodium version of whatever your favorite food is. And you can do that at any restaurant that you go to, probably not fast food per se, but restaurants where they prepare your food, you ask for that, ask for low sodium versions.
Yeah.
So we have another question coming in. What about, and this is from Dave in Philadelphia, what about cooking collard greens and black-eyed peas in pork, turkey, or no meat?
Well, ideally, you don't want to cook it with any meat, because ideally, again, it's an acquired taste. It's a cultural taste. But certainly smoked turkey is probably a bit better, but there are spices that you can use. I make a great kale and I use no meat at all, and it's delicious, but it's the spicing in it. So
am I the only vegetarian on this call?
Can you throw out your spice secrets?
I use curry powder, onion powder, garlic powder, and low sodium soy sauce or tamari. And I also, I use those. And and at the end, throw some, after it's cooked, you put some white vinegar in to take away the bitter taste, and it's sweet. And
I can actually, if I may, as I think I'm the only vegetarian on this call, for oh, great. Okay. There is one other thing.
I didn't know you were on a call.
I'm not. We're on a podcast. We're on a podcast, but I have
actually on a show, on,
so I feel like it's a call.
We're gonna get you. We're gonna put you on a call.
There is one other thing, because I know that there's this need to do the smoked flavoring, and actually having done catering for some years as well, there is this little secret that is liquid smoke. Yep. Amazing. And I have had people come to me and say, how did you, and you sure that there wasn't anybody's elbow or neck in there? No, it's liquid smoke and smoked paprika.
Yeah.
But you might have, it might not be an elbow or neck, but somebody might have put their foot in it.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And that combination of liquid smoke, a little vinegar, and maybe lemon, and all of those spices you said, with onion, green pepper, red pepper, yellow pepper, you
Yep.
know, and you can stir fry a pot with a little bit of olive or avocado oil.
Yep.
You working?
So we have another question out there coming from Christopher Wyckoff. Speak to the energy drinks impact on our health.
Ooh, that's a good one, Christopher.
Thompson. Yeah.
For that. That was one of
Well,
ours. Thank you.
it's the amount of certainly the caffeine and the sugar. You know, just read the labels and look at the amount of sugar. And some people don't do well with caffeine. And just quickly,
Yeah.
I DNA testing done, and I found out that I don't metabolize or clear caffeine quickly out of my body. So I'll take one cup of coffee, and I'm wired for 12 hours. So you know, I steer away from energy drinks because
can you expand on that DNA testing and how that relates to food and what you eat?
Yeah, I did a research study in wards 7 and 8 in DC, which are low-income communities, and we did DNA testing. It was part of it wasn't the focus of the study, but it was part of it. And we found out that, for example, everyone had a specific gene variant or biomarker that was associated with lower levels of blood vitamin D. Over 45% of participants had a variant for weight gain and early onset obesity. 85% carried a gene variant for high blood pressure, and 80% had a variant for lower insulin production. So I think DNA testing is critical now. And Karen, just as an aside, I was talking this morning to a researcher at Howard, and it's so important for us to get our people to get tested in a safe way, that we know that our data is not going to be shared.
Agreed.
And some funding
Or sold.
I'm just saying. Yeah.
Absolutely agreed. Is there, on that note, is there a way to do that is accessible to us?
So we're in the lightning round. This is 1 minute or less.
Yes, because Howard actually does the testing. So they did the testing for the study. So it's just a matter of integrating it into the research, into the practice at Howard. And we can talk about that offline.
Thank you.
All right.
There you go, Dr. Mel.
All right. That's it for our audience questions? All right. Well, I just need to know, because that's why we're here. We are here to hear from our audience. We thank you. Thank you to our incredible guests, Dr. Linda Thompson, Dr. Psyche Williams Forson. You guys just left us with just a wealth of knowledge, things to think about, cutting edge information, historical facts. I mean, you were incredible. Thank you so much. Thank you to Karen Parker, our fantastic co-host from Howard University RCMI Community Engagement Corps, for bringing some wonderful questions and points and just richness to the discussion. Of course, thank you, Mr. Wayne Bruce, producer and co-host, and most of all, to my Be Health Empowered family. Thank you for having us and welcoming us into your computers tonight and airwaves. Before I go, I want to tell you about an opportunity for a special research study that Howard University is doing. They've asked me to ask the Be Health Empowered family to participate if you're interested. Totally voluntary. It's called the COVID Resilience Research Study, really checking how did you fare and how are you faring during the pandemic. It takes maybe 20 minutes to do 2 surveys, and you get compensated up to $100. So if you have any interest whatsoever, right there on the screen, reach out to Dana Harvey at danaharveyresearch@gmail.com. That's DANA, Dana Harvey, HARVEY, research@gmail.com. Well, that's it for us tonight. Remember, if I don't see you until next time, always be wise, be well, and be health empowered. Thanks for tuning in.
I guess I should thank the Robinsons. They invited me. They still don't know. I hooked up with Dave 3 days ago. He'll start coughing tomorrow. And I bet in 10 days he'll be on a ventilator. Now, his wife, she's not vaccinated because she thinks it'll prevent her from being pregnant. But what they don't know is that I can decrease sperm count. Sorry, Dave. Good luck with that.